how do you know when you're too early or too late, right? Like squiggles, I mean, the floor for squiggles is like 10 ETH, it's like 40 grand. I mean, the rare squiggles, as you go up the spectrum in rarity, could go for a couple hundred grand, if not more a pop. Like, where do you decide as a collector, like, hey, you know what? I'm just too late on squiggles. I'd rather find something sub 1 ETH. I'd rather get in early. Like, where do you draw the line on, hey, I may have missed it, or hey, I might still have time to get involved here?
I think about how active do you want to be in a community. If you're willing to make a serious investment into a high value asset like a squiggle, and you're looking to be able to come in and do some cool stuff in that community, it's 100% worth it. If your intentions are to come in and start flipping NFTs for ETH, which power to you. I've flipped a lot of NFTs in my life. I think it's the single most exciting part about crypto. That's a very different asset class. But I would say if you're looking to make a serious mark in this industry and you're looking to get a name for yourself beyond, what you post on Twitter, contributing to a DAO and more specifically collecting a high profile asset is going to earn you exponentially more capital than flipping the floor on some random PFP project that came out yesterday, which in reality is really just a speculation game to add another zero to your bank account, which I think goes back to the core of what we talked about earlier, where crypto is about far more than making money. And what you should really be optimizing for is the strength of your network and your contribution to the space, because those are going to directly correlate to the amount of value that you create in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you, man. I mean, the connections I've made, and I'm sure that you have made just through being authentic with people, is worth a zillion times more than flipping someone's project.
Mm-hmm. I'd add another
And
comment
Cooper,
there
like,
too.
oh, sorry, shoot. Yeah, sorry, shoot,
I was
shoot.
going to add a comment quickly that if you are buying NFTs today, you are still extremely early. This is an asset class that has been around for maybe 5 years. If you look at this over a 100-year time scale, the amount of assets that will be created in the next generation is going to be unprecedented. And so it's very easy to look at something like a squiggle and say that I missed the boat. But there are less than 1 million people in the world collecting NFTs right now. And this will be the single largest asset class in existence, in my opinion. And so if you think about, am I too early or too late? You might be too late for the local top that's coming here in the next couple of months, but over a very long time horizon, you are extremely early. And I would use this as a learning time to think about, what are the values that I stand for as a leader in this space and as a creator in my communities? And how do I find an asset class or an NFT collection that allows me to really double down on that and take these learnings to my friends and family and feel like I'm very confident in the ideas that I'm promoting?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And I was going to ask you, like, we've never been through a bear market on NFTs. Like, we've never seen
Mhm.
liquidity dry up for $100,000 asset. Like, it's a 1-for-1 trade, right? No buyer, liquidity zero. It's literally worthless. Like, can you walk me through what you think would happen in a bear market? And not just for prices, but I mean for communities, for creators, for builders, for the people on Discord. Like, what is that going to be like?
Illiquid JPEGs. I think it's everyone's favorite term here. And I think there's a reality in that. I think there's a lot of high value assets that simply will not be able to sell. What that looks like in practice is floors becoming lower and lower to the price that they are not up 100x from where they bought, but they're actually a lot closer to where they were sold at. And more specifically, I would say it's going to be consolidation. So right now, if you look across the board, there's maybe 100 to 150 assets on WGMI.io that are tracking the floor price across all these assets. I would say in a bear market, most of those will die. I think that most of the capital will flow into a very select amount of communities that are doing a really exceptional job. And your goal as a collector in the space is to trade your way into those high value communities. So that as we enter a bear market, you're not stuck holding illiquid assets with no true community ownership. You're left holding extremely valuable assets that have collectors that will be there during the bear market, because their MO has never been to make money. It's simply to create culture and to create community. And they will be there regardless of what the price of that asset is.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I do think a lot of people are going to get scared. Like, an NFT bear market is tough because liquidity is just the driving factor, man. I'm just concerned that the thing that got everyone attracted to NFTs in the space is, number go up in the community, but that could really take a hit in a bear market.
It will take a hit. I tell a lot of my friends, always be optimizing for your ETH stack. It's really easy to get caught up in like, oh, my NFT is worth this much because the floor is worth this much. But what I say to people is your NFT isn't worth shit until you've actually sold it. You can have paper values where you think that something's worth a lot, but until someone actually buys that thing from you off OpenSea and you see the ether in your wallet, you have not made any money yet. And so, I think it's very common for people in NFT community to say, oh, I'm never selling. It's going to keep going up. Don't sell, paper hands, et cetera, et cetera. But you really need to take profits in this space. I think we are in an unprecedented territory where the amount of money being made on NFTs every day is unlike anything I've seen in my 5 years in crypto. It is not sustainable. It's extremely addicting, extremely exciting, but it will not last for a long time. So if you're someone who's been fortunate enough to buy NFTs, which have gone up 5 or 10x against ETH, please recognize that that is an extremely unlikely scenario to happen over a consistent period of time, and make sure that you're going back to ETH so that as things start turning up here in the next couple of months, you are exposed to the assets that will be crushing the most over a very short time period.
I'm with you, man. So switching gears a bit, I want to talk specifically about art. So there's obviously a full spectrum of different types of NFTs. You have axes you can battle with or yield. You have land and axie and ember sword and others. Then you have pure art. You have generative art. You have Beeple's art. You have all different types and forms. What gets you so excited about pure NFT art? Like, there's Netflix documentaries around provenance and transparency and all these things, but like, what is it that gets you really excited about like a Fidenza or a Ringer or something else?
It is a metaverse status symbol. I don't think we've ever had the ability to place such a high financial value on digital assets. I think that art in the traditional world is how this works and exists. If I've been extremely successful and I want to diversify my assets, having art is a way for me to show that I am culturally relevant while also having a high degree of social and financial capital. This is what NFTs are to me. These blue chip art projects are ways for people to say, I have made it in crypto, but I am not going to flex the amount of Ether in my wallet. I am going to flex my NFT collection. And that allows you to come across as a very culturally successful person without flaunting your gains in a profit and loss perspective. And I think that ability has not existed prior to this recent trend in NFTs. And I think this is the single biggest reason why they will continue to go up in price, even over the course of a bear market, because a lot of these collectors could not care less if the price of Ether goes up and down. They have made their wealth 10 over. And what they're looking to do is really establish themselves as a cultural leader in the space. And those assets will never leave their wallet again.
So, do you, like the mega buyers of the space, like let's talk, like the Suzus of the world, who Kim and Kyle are absolutely incredible guys, but they have a hell of a story. But I mean, they tweet stuff that they buy, and I mean, the magnificent works like Fidenzas that are over $1 million a pop. You're saying that these guys will literally never sell. And
Yeah.
so as a status symbol, like they don't really have to worry. But like, how does that affect like me and you? Like, I mean, maybe down the line we'll end up buying some Fidenzas, but like it's hard for us to get access to that outside of a fractionalized version, or it's hard for the masses to get access to that. So like, how does their inability to sell help us on like a price floor or something like that, I guess? Or does it not?
I think it pumps our bags. I think the more high profile people that are collecting these assets, the higher likelihood is that they will continue to go up in price, both from a floor perspective and from a high rarity perspective. I say to people when I'm collecting NFTs, I use two strategies. One is trade the floor, trade the most common versions of the asset class, or buy the top 1% of those assets. When you start to look in the middle, I think it gets very nuanced. And so as you start to enter into these collections, I think that buying the floor is as simple as trying to buy the cheapest thing on OpenSea and really just having exposure to it. And then to Tom's point here, if you are looking for exposure to that top 1%, maybe it's not about making sure you're spending $5 million on a Fidenza. Maybe it's about looking on things like fractional.art to find a top 1% Fidenza that's fractionalized and having exposure to that through a fractionalized token.
So I asked a couple of guests on the series so far. We're an investor in fractional, and full disclosure, I own some of the NFTs we mentioned during this podcast. But one of the things I found interesting was I totally agree with you. Either buy the floor or buy the top rarity, because like the middle of the stack like rarely gets repriced up. Granted, you may have other reasons for buying that. Maybe you like the art. Maybe it's the most you have access to financially. But one of the questions I had for you, Cooper, was, let's say you take the best punk in the world and you fractionalize it, and everybody can get a piece of that. Enough of the collectible supply is fractionalized and enough is in the AMM where the price isn't insane. It makes sense to just buy $1,000 or something like that. That obviously bids up the implied valuation of the rare NFT, yada yada. But why the hell would I buy a floor punk when I could buy part of a zombie or part of an alien? Like, and the other question for you is like, what does that even do for the floor punks? Does anybody want to buy a floor squiggle or a floor punk if they can buy part of the best version?
I think there's a lot more autonomy and a lot more sense of ownership actually over having the whole asset. I think that fractionalization is a great way to get exposure, but I think the level of ownership you feel like you have over a fractional piece of a top rarity asset versus owning a floor asset is very different. I think that there is less need for third party trust and secondary market liquidity to be successful. So, for example, if I'm buying a top 1% fraction of a punk, I need to expect that there's a Uniswap V3 pool. I need to be aware of things like the reserve price and buyout decisions. I need to be contributing in a very fundamentally different way. For me, having a floor asset, which I can list at any point in time I don't need to ask anyone else, and I don't need to look for any secondary market liquidity. I have the free reign to basically do whatever I want. And so I think there's a world in which you have a mix of both. For example, I own a lot of fractional tokens and I also own a lot of floor assets, but I think the values and principles behind them are fundamentally different. There's a specific set of actions that comes with collecting those type of works.
It's actually a really good point because, my thesis or one of my theses around fractionalized ownership was, everybody can use the likeness of something to create a killer community. You and I could share the same NFT as our profile picture. We can go in the community for just this one punk and, you know, everyone's mind could go wild there. But to your point, there's not I don't feel like I own anything. I just feel like I have, financial access to the upside. I don't feel like I'm part of the punk community, right?
Mm. Yeah, and I think we're starting to see examples that are shifting this narrative. One that I'll call out is Hoodie by DSFi. This is a fractionalized hoodie punk that is on fractional.art. If you hold one hoodie token, you can have access to a private chat in the fractional Discord specifically for hoodie owners. And so that's an example of something where you do feel like you have more of a sense of ownership over it. The likeness of that specific punk becomes higher because of the fact that it has community backing. But I think as an investor and as a collector, my intentions are very different. If I'm buying fractions of a hoodie asset, I am buying that for social access to a community, which is fundamentally different from me buying a floor price asset to make a financial return off of. I think they share a lot of qualities, and I think that is a very, blurred or gray area. But I think that I noticed that, communities that form around these assets are fundamentally different, responsible to which kind of level you get involved with. And what I would say for creators of these projects is making sure that there are opportunities for community to get involved at very different levels. So it's not only about buying a top 1% to get into an exclusive community. Even if I have $1,000, I should be able to have exposure to a niche subset of something like a punks, like going into a Discord server and saying GM every morning to everyone else who holds the fucking hoodie tokens.
Well, it's funny. Like, I'm trying to think through this. Like, let's say you and I ape into that fractional hoodie, right? And me and you we say good morning every morning. We're on the Discord. We're having a good time. We're building a community around it. And then Suzu comes in and bids the reserve price, starts the auction, and is, nobody competes with that. And he ends up buying it. My fractions go get, I get escrowed ETH for my fractions, and I'm no longer a part of the community. I'm literally forced out. I never really thought about it like that, but to your point, that's a really good reason why you'd want a one of one.
Yeah, I think closed cycle fractionalized projects is actually a really powerful thing. I think that we see across things like mirror crowd funds, across fractionalized assets. A lot of what we see today is that once the act of fractionalization happens, that asset will never be made whole again. There are very little buyouts. There's oftentimes very little secondary market liquidity. And so in the event that someone comes and buys Hoodie or comes and buys Party of the Living Dead, that story that comes from being a part of that specific moment in time will translate over into the next community. It's not like the members of that community are only there for that one specific asset. They are there because of the ethos and intent behind it. And as something like that goes through a buyout process, you're going to make relationships where you then DM the person on the side and say, hey, Hoodie just got bought out. Where are we spending our time next? And that kind of rolling nature of always having community mobilizing to different assets, I think is exactly why NFTs are so powerful as a financial asset class.